It is Wednesday, October 18th, 2023. This is Raven Dana, and welcome to Walking Between the Worlds. This is Class One of a three-part series about bees, the magic of bees. Bees are extraordinary creatures. I have had a fondness for bees ever since I was little. Other people have always been afraid of bees, but I've always gravitated towards them. I've never been stung. I was stung by a wasp once, but that's because I sat on it. But I've always been that person that can pick bees up, take them out of the house. Even wasps, I've removed wasps. There's just a fascination with the life of the bee, and I'm just thrilled to be able to present this class. And I think that not only will you learn quite a bit, but your view will be radically changed with regards to what you think of beekeeping and honey. And well, you'll see as we go along, we're going to go through quite a process here. Every class, all three of these classes, will be broken down into different pieces. You'll get some information about the hive and hive life. You'll get some information about the anatomy of the bee, some information about individual bees and their jobs, and then we'll also be taking a look at the things that they make, right? So it's not just honey, but we'll be looking at honey and wax and what's called bee bread that gets fed to the little bees, and propolis. So there's lots of different things, lots of components. So we're just going to dive right in today with the history, a little bit of history of bees. Bees have had a relationship with humans for thousands and thousands of years. We know that the first honey was collected a very, very long time ago. 15,000 years ago, we have evidence of humans collecting honey. Humans have been keeping bees, and I say the word lightly, keeping bees. They've had bees on residence and have cohabitated with them for quite some time. Beekeeping is one of the world's oldest professions, which is something I didn't know until I started digging a little bit deeper in the research into this. 4,500 years ago, Egypt kept bees. They had an actual apiary. Beekeeping was very important because the honey was tremendously magical, potent, special. Honey was used not only as dressing for the royal table, it was used as medicine, it was used in skin treatments. Honey was even used to pay taxes. It was that important. So many of the ancient cultures had beekeeping and actually had gods or goddesses, mostly goddesses, because bees, queen bee, they had mostly goddesses devoted to honey. So some of those the goddesses include those found at Crete, the Melissa, in Italy, the Roman god Melania. In Lithuania, there was Ostera. In Africa, we have Oshun. Ireland, the Irish goddess Brigid. And even the Mayans had a god of the bees and the hive called Amuzen. So it's a deal. Bees have been around a long time, and they've been honored and valued and worshipped and learned from. Bees are not just little insects. They have extraordinary properties and extraordinary intelligence. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but bees actually recognize their beekeeper. Bees know who they see every day. They become friendly with some people and not so much with other people. So there are beekeepers who can open their hives and handle their bees without any equipment whatsoever, which I think is astonishing. But it's more common than you think among beekeepers that are what we'll call bee-centric. In other words, when their hive is set up for to allow the bee to do what it needs to do in its natural habitat, rather than to interfere with the processes, the bees become very comfortable and they feel safe. And bees, by the way, their stingers are essentially for protection from invaders into their hives. So it's not like bees really go around stinging people. That's a myth. It doesn't really happen that way. If you swatted a bee or you get too close to a hive, you might get stung. But generally speaking, it's not a thing that bees tend to do. Wasps are a different story. This is not a wasp class. Okay. In case you didn't know it, honeybees are not native to the Americas. They got brought here from England. In 1635, settlers of Newburgh, Massachusetts had bees. By 5 years afterwards, they had a fully operational apiary. Initially in Egypt and Rome, bees, the hives that were kept were made sometimes of mud from the Nile or wicker baskets. And as time went on, there was a lot of different experimentation with hives. Eventually, we arrived at the type of hive that is most commonly used today, the Langsford type hive. And we'll talk more about that when we really look at the construct of a hive, which is not going to be this week. But it's fascinating how bees construct their hives and what they actually do to maintain it. So honeybees in America are not native. They were brought over by England. By the 1780s, they were already in New York, and by 1790, they had arrived in Florida. By the next year, they had made their way to Cuba. It's a very interesting thing that we did not have honeybees here. Beekeepers who are bee-centric know a lot about the hive by the sound that the bees make. Bees communicate through the sound of the vibration that their wings make. They don't have ears. So bees communicate through sound, through touch, through vibration. I mean, not sound that they can hear, but through the vibration of their wings. The vibration of their wings changes depending on the activities occurring in the hive. If there's a threat, the sound will change. If the queen dies, there's a wailing, mournful sound. In fact, there's an old custom, nobody's sure really where it came from, about telling the bees about main events in the beekeepers' lives. If somebody gets married, you tell the bees. If someone dies, you tell the bees. If the beekeeper dies, you tell the bees. And then you take the new beekeeper and introduce him or her to the bees. And it's a very fascinating and old practice. And beekeepers who are bee-centric talk a lot about that, talk a lot about the necessity of bonding with the hive and letting them know your emotional state, because they're extraordinarily sensitive. And if you don't want to get stung, if you don't want to be perceived as a threat, you come to the hive with a sense of quiet and peacefulness and being present. You don't come to the hive in an agitated, angry, threatening state, because the bees know. Bees are extraordinarily sensitive. They're very, very, how can I say this? They're integrated with nature in a way that we can't quite fathom, because they have special abilities that we don't have, that we humans don't have. Their sounds, they'll let us know about their health, about the state of their queen. Their sounds, the buzzing that they make, the tones of their sounds tell the beekeeper a tremendous amount of information. And it's also, of course, how they communicate with each other. That and the famous, what we call the bee dance or the waggle dance, which is a specifically designed dance that the bees make that allow the other bees to know where they've been when they've been foraging. And I'm going to talk more about that later. All right, bees do recognize they're humans. And they can feel and see differently, of course, than we can. There are between 30 and 50,000 bees typically in a given hive. And about 2/3 of those bees are foraging maidens. Now, there's a higher percentage of bees that are maidens, but 2/3 approximately are foraging maidens. So they're going out to collect nectar and to collect pollen and nectar. They're specifically going every day on a variety of different short journeys to do their collection. There are other maidens in the hive that have other tasks. Some are nurse bees, some are defense bees, some are are rebuilding or patching holes, some are cleaner bees, some are maintaining other functions in the hive. So again, about 2/3 are foraging maidens. Nurse bead, guard beads, and all that make up the rest. Now, a foraging maiden bee will make about 30 runs a day and visit about 500 flowers per trip. That, my friends, think about that. About 30 runs a day, 30 times a day, visiting about 500 flowers, plants and flowers, because, there are flowers in the trees and all that stuff. So it's a lot. It's a lot to think about. Bees not only choose the pollen and the nectar, they know how to choose the best pollen and the best nectar from the healthiest plants, which I think is extraordinary. They are aware of how to collect from plants that at specific times of day and at specific types, at specific stages of the plant life, the nectar and the pollen is at its peak. So every speck of pollen that a bee collects tells that bee a story. That bee knows about the plant, the soil, how much sun it gets, the minerals of the soil as they're expressed in the plant, and a variety of other bits of information about chemical compounds. So the bees take this information back to the hive with them. When they find a particularly rich place, a place filled with flowers that have something extraordinary in them, or particularly rich in, say, some mineral, they are going to go back and they're going to dance, do what humans call the waggle dance, so that it's a way to let the other bees know how to find that location again. And it's really an amazing, it's quite amazing what they do and how they do it. They actually dance their dance in the hive, using the ceiling of the hive as a model for the sky, and they dance at a particular angle that has to do with the sun in relation to where they found the flowers or the trees that they're communicating. So it's quite a map that their little dance is able to produce. And what's, I think, even most fascinating is that during the course of a given day, if the bees come back and that the initial bees are doing the waggle dance, the angle of their dance will change in relation to the current angle of the sun. So that it tells us something about how the bees navigate through knowing where the sun is and using the reference of where the sun is in the sky to triangulate where the field of flowers is or where the grove of trees is. So it's quite extraordinary. All right, let's talk a little bit about the eyes of a bee. Bee anatomy. It's a fascinating thing. Bees have 5 eyes. 3 of their 5 eyes are the smaller eyes, and they can see extra colors that we cannot see. They see colors called bee yellow and bee purple that, we can only guess what that is. Bees can see electromagnetic fields. Bees can see ultraviolet light. So bees see things about the flowers that we can't see, and that's a large part of where they get their information from. Bees can see 5 times faster than we can. 5 times. They can see around themselves about 200 degrees, so quite a bit farther than we can see. They can see movements at 1/300th of a second. Humans can see movements at about 1/50th of a second, right? Those small eyes that see the UV light are also made for navigation. They can track light, and they can track patterns of UV in as the sun shines on the plants and flowers. There are patterns that are made that the eyes of the bee can see that we cannot. Okay. They're two large compound eyes. Let them see with polarized vision. So each of those compound eyes has thousands of little hexagonal lenses that fit together like tiles. The compound eyes do send light to the retina and does tell their brain, give their brain visual images. But they see prismatic layers of light through those eyes as well. And again, that assists them in creating these intricate maps of the world based on light and electromagnetic fields. Bees have very high performance motion sensors, allowing them to detect very slight movements in their field of vision with extraordinary swiftness. This feature helps with flight. It helps them to calculate wind speed and trajectory. It helps them to establish, and that with their antennae also helps them to establish wind flow and changes in wind flow. And they work as a team to do this, passing information to each other to measure air movements. Okay. The language again, language of the bees, movement, touch, scent, and vibration compose the language of the bees. They have no ears. Their system of communication is extraordinary and complex. They're capable of dancing the map of a location at a great distance, and they inform the foragers when they have found something that they need for the hive or want the hive to have more of. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the family of the bees. I'm going to introduce you to two of the family members today, the maidens and the drones. We'll spend a lot of time next time on the queen and her extraordinary story from her single life in the queen cell to becoming the queen, to what happens as she ages, and what that has to do with the interplay of sunlight. So this is all about, the bees are all about a relationship to light. The life of the bee is tied together with the life of the sun. In fact, there's a documentary called Queen of the Sun. You can find it on YouTube, and I recommend it. We will also discover that what has been talked about in these past handful of years about the decline of the bees and about the collapse of the hives is much less a product of what's happening with the hives themselves, and much more a product is what's been happening with the interference of humans and what humans have done to hive life and how we have compromised their health and well-being. So a lot of these things aren't widely talked about. You'll hear about the mites, and you'll hear about how mites are causing hive collapse. Well, first of all, the mites were not in this country. They were accidentally imported from elsewhere. But the main problem is that all of the interference that modern beekeepers cause because they're looking for more honey, more profit, and they're not bee-centric, has created a severe and serious issue with the health of bees and their ability to recover from challenges. So we're going to explore that in detail in the final class. But just so you know now that we're headed in that direction. Okay, so the maidens. The maidens make up 90% of the population of the hive. And in the winter, it's 100% because the drones will die off. After 21 days in a cell, the maiden will chew her way out, and she will start immediately helping to tend the brood cells. In a few days, she will become a nurse bee, and she'll begin feeding the pips, the little larvae, feeding them her glandular secretions of royal jelly. Now, that's going to protect the larva from infection. After that, after a few days, she will wean them from the royal jelly, and begin feeding them something called bee bread. Bee bread is basically composed of pollen that's mixed with some bits of honey, beeswax, and bee digestive enzymes, digestive juices. If the queen cells contain larvae, then they are fed a steady diet of royal jelly, and that's what makes a queen a queen. So only the queens receive royal jelly for their entire development period. The other bees, receive royal jelly for a few days, and then they receive this mixture of pollen and honey and etc. called bee bread. Maidens do essentially all the work. They build the comb. They feed and care for the queen. They inoculate the babies with their digestive enzymes. They feed everyone in the hive. They maintain a year-round temperature. They patch holes in the hive. If there's a threat, if something gets into the hive that shouldn't be there, say a slug gets in or a mouse gets in and dies, that they can't easily remove, the maidens will make propolis and they will wall off, they'll seal up in like a little tomb the thing that they can't get rid of so that it doesn't infect the hive. It's absolutely astonishing what they do. So the maidens are the maidens are the show. The maidens do almost everything. They gather, process, and store nectar and pollen. They make honey. They clean each other. They remove dead bees. They defend the hive. They prepare the hive for swarming. And if necessary, they find a new location. Swarming, by the way, is not a bad thing. It gets a bad rap. Bees are supposed to swarm. When a hive is healthy and their numbers are large, they get too large for the particular hive. And so the queen and a certain number of the bees will leave the hive in search of a new location. A bee swarm is not a dangerous thing. It goes and looks for a tree, or it usually goes and attaches itself somewhere, and then emissaries are sent out looking for a new location, and when one is found, they go to the new location. So if you ever see a swarm stalled out on a car or a tree or someone's front door, you call a beekeeper, and they will come with a bee box, and the bees will go inside the new hive because that's what they're looking for anyway. Okay? Don't get yourself upset about seeing a swarm of bees. They're not going to attack you. They're just looking for a new place to live. Okay. Maiden bees, though, are so extraordinary. That if they get trapped outside their hive overnight, some of them, sometimes they won't. They can't survive it. So if you ever see a bee that's in the house at night, you might think about putting a little honey on a plate, putting the bee in a little container with holes in it over that plate so it can be calm and in the dark and have food until you can release it in the morning. So just saying. All right. Not only does the maiden produce all of these different activities, not only does she do all this, but during the process, of course, of collecting nectar and pollen, she pollinates plants. So considering that the honeybee is responsible for pollinating 71 of the top 100 crops that feed the world, right? She's not just making honey. She's the honeybees are keeping the world going. They're feeding the world. They make tens of thousands of trips to tens of thousands of flowers every season. Mature maidens, as they age, their duties, their jobs change. The more mature maidens care for the queen. That's what they do. As the queen's maidens, the worker bees, these worker bees spread the essential, it's called the queen mandibular pheromone, QMP. And the QMP is the scent of the queen, which the queen's maidens march through the hive because the queen is not always visible. But their job, in part, is to make sure that all of the bees know that the queen is alive and well, and that's how they know that they take her pheromones through the hive. Maidens are extraordinary. If a queen should die suddenly, a maiden can actually step up and lay eggs as a temporary measure, and we're going to talk about that in detail when we talk about the queen. In the summertime, at the peak season, a maiden's life is about 45 days. So essentially, they're born, they go through these different tasks from nurse bee, foraging bee, cleaner bee. Some of them are cleaners, guard bees, and the queen's maidens. And they're basically completely worn out and their wings are tattered when they finally do die. They are, that phrase, busy as a bee. All right, the next member of the bee family we're going to talk about today are the drones. Now, if you talk to the wrong beekeepers, in other words, beekeepers that are not especially bee-centric, they're going to say, well, drones have one job, it's to inseminate the queen, and that's all they're good for, and they don't do anything else. Well, it's not exactly true. It's true that they don't work, they don't have a stinger, they don't make honey. Drones are made for love. Drones have huge eyes, even bigger than the other bees. Drones are extraordinarily sensitive creatures. They carry the history of the hive. Without the drone bees, there would be no carrying on of the DNA of the hive. So the drone bees often go directly to the nursery when they enter another hive, which, by the way, is something that only a drone bee can do. The drone bees can often enter the other hive undisputed, whereas if a worker bee, if a maiden bee, tried to enter another hive, she would be stopped by the guard bees and booted out, sent away, because the thought would be that she was trying to steal honey, steal food, right? The drone bees, though, are allowed in, and they can go right into the nursery and begin to vibrate, sing their song. The song of the drone bees, the vibrational sound of the drone bees, is of course different from the vibrational sound of the Melissa, of the maiden bees. And the way it's spoken about with bee-centric beekeepers is that while the maiden bee's song sings in the hive about hive life and what it is to be a happy part of the hive and what your job is and how to do it, because the drone bee flies freely into the sun, doesn't have to go collect pollen, doesn't have a care in the world except to join the congregation of drones and hope to mate with a virgin queen. That's what he does. That's his whole life. But he gets out there and he goes to other hives and he explores the world. So the sound of the drone bees is said to be about the place of bees in general, bees, the capital B, all bees, in the world. Whereas the song of the hive is about hive life. And I think that's a fascinating and beautiful way to look at it. So the drone flights expand the hive's knowledge. They're like an extra sensory organ of the hive. They are able to bring back information again about where other hives are, how other hives are doing, what's happening with different places where the drones might see things or notice things, and they bring that information back to the hive, and the maiden bees might go find a great batch of wildflowers, right? So the drones are considered the connectors among hives. They live out their lives traveling freely, visiting other hives, and rising high into the air in congregations of drones, awaiting for a virgin queen's flight. So the virgin queen, as she leaves her hive only once and flies into the sun and becomes what they would call activated, like her pheromones turn on, and she will mate with somewhere between 12 and 20 drones in the air. The drones, of course, live for this moment. That's what they want. They're vital to the health. They are vital to the health of the hive, as their primary task is mating with the queen. Now, the drones are not going to mate with the queen of their own hive. They carry the genetic material of that queen out to other hives, to other queens, right? So when the drones congregate, and there can be hundreds of drones in the air, in a zone called a congregation zone. Science, by the way, doesn't really know how the drones find or create congregation zones, but they tend to be in the same place every year. And what science says is that it seems that the congregation zones are in places that are kind of protected from the wind and have get a lot of sun. Now, what's the bee intuitives say is that because the bees have this specialized eyesight, that a congregation zone is more determined by what the sun is doing, the electromagnetic spectrum of the earth as it relates to the sun at different angles, that it has something to do with a grid that the bees can see that make this the optimal place for waiting for your queen. They also, science being they, also have no idea how the queen finds the drones. Rest assured, there's a way. They probably feel the vibration or get the scent. They're very, very, very much able to smell pheromones. By the way, the drones can scent the pheromones of the queen at quite a distance. At I think it's 60 meters is quite a distance. Now, in the hive, the drones spend a fair amount of their time kind of immobile and at the periphery. But they do have periods of hyperactivity, even in the hive, that correspond to that restlessness corresponds to the time outside when there's a congregation of drones in the air somewhere waiting for queens. So the duration of that restlessness depends on the weather, and it also depends on whether the weather is suitable for mating flights. But it happens to all the drones, whether they're out in the air that day or not. Now, on warm and sunny days during the mating season, a sexually mature drone will fly out of the hive and congregate with other drones high in the air to form a cloud of bees. There may be as many as 1,000 drones from 200, 250 different colonies. The drones themselves are going to fly, they can fly from 1 to 3 miles from their hives to reach a nearby congregation zone. A drone in peak season may go on multiple mating flights per day looking for the hope of a queen, right? And lots of drones, not very many queens, especially because a queen is going to make essentially one mating flight. It's rare that they make more than one. It can happen, but generally they make one mating flight. The drone brings the best traits of the hive to the mating process. So everything that's in that hive that has served them, that has helped their survival or helped maybe a hive has a really good hive patching skill. Maybe another hive makes extraordinary honey. Whatever it is, whatever that particular hive skill or skill set is going to be brought out into the world by those drones. So while science knows not a lot about these things, rest assured that there are plenty of things happening under the surface that we may eventually discover a little bit more about. If not through science, then through those who are working directly with the bees. All right, the drone's, again, main function is to find and fertilize a receptive queen. Drones are attracted by the pheromones and also by visual cues with the queen in midair. Drones have huge, huge eyes compared to the other bees. The receptor on the male's antenna can detect, here it is, can detect an available queen, yes, up to 60 meters away. Okay. Now, the drone's penis is inside its body, but in the presence of the queen, it turns inside out. It comes out. Once they mate and the drone starts to pull away, its penis and part of its abdomen is ripped away and left behind, and it falls and it dies. The next drone to mate with the queen removes the penis that was left behind and inserts his and starts again. So again, an average queen on her maiden flight will mate with somewhere between 12, can mate up to 20 drones. Now, that gives her enough fertilization, enough sperm to fertilize eggs for the rest of her life, which is generally somewhere between 5 and 7 years. Queens live quite some time, while the drones live a season and the maidens live about 45 days. The queen can live 5 to 7 years and produce fertile eggs for the entire time. Upon returning to her hive, she is ready to begin her lifelong job, her task as queen mother. The drones, on the other hand, they are preparing for one thing and one thing only, which is to mate with that queen. And then when they do, that is the end of the drone story. But I can't but hope that it's well worth it for the drone. All right, now here's a note about queens mating. One of the things that modern beekeepers tend to do is artificially inseminate the queen. Not a good plan. It seriously weakens, well, it shortens the life of the queen, it weakens the hive. It's wrong in lots of ways. Queens mating with only a single drone or a small number of drones produce colonies that are not reproductively fit and that have poor immunity. So that's just something, something that you want to know about going forward as we continue looking at the life of bees and our interference with their processes. So I'm going to suggest that you take a look at a site called The Bee Boys, and also to take a look at, on YouTube you can find the documentary called The Queen of the Sun. They're lovely. It gives you plenty of information. And if you want to, you can also look up the sounds of bees. I would suggest that you poke around a little bit, and as perhaps a meditative journey, I'm going to do a meditative journey, by the way, with some bee sounds, so you can look forward to that. But as a meditative journey on your own, you might listen to the sounds of a healthy hive. So you can actually Google that up and you'll find it, the sounds of a healthy hive, and enjoy that. I would say go find yourself, for the duration of this class, go find yourself an excellent source of raw honey. Not heated, not filtered, not messed with in any way, from a bee-centric hive, from a bee-centric company, and you can find them. You can just type it in and you'll find them. You might even be able to find one locally. But I highly suggest that as we go through this class together, that you give yourself that gift of honey and of getting in touch with the life of bees at a more deeper, ancient, spiritual level. We're going to take a deeper look at some of the connections between bees and humans throughout history. And we're going to take a look at some of the special relationships that bees have in the magical community and what they tend to mean and what we tend to notice around the lives of bees and how they appear in our daily existence. So this is today our introduction on bees. This class, again, I'm really enjoying the reading and the research, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them for me or email me or something, let me know. And if you have a question, I will find the answer. If I can't find the answer reading it, I'll go find a beekeeper. I do actually know a beekeeper, so I'm hoping to be able to take some photographs to post for the class. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I'm hoping to get that to happen before the hives get closed down for the season, because it's getting chilly. So, all right. Well, I hope that you enjoyed today's class. I will be posting a meditation either tonight or tomorrow that goes with today's work. And I'll see you next time. So thank you for joining me today. This is Raven Dana, and this is Class 1 of Be Magic. I will see you next time. Bye now.